People like to run. I've seen them fall under my tires as I speed through crowded intersections, but do any of these runners stop to appreciate game worlds? Yeah, didn't think so. Final Fantasy IX is bursting with shit to appreciate. It is so full that people were still discovering side quests over a decade after it released. And if that's one guy of millions making this discovery, imagine what the average player missed. Did they stop to read all the signs? Did they know there were signs which give clues and details about the history of the world and the figures within? Do they care? Well, I care. It's someone's job to write and translate miscellaneous dialogue, and you're here mashing A to clear through it because it stops you from mashing A to clear through combat. Hey, dialogue guys, I appreciate you. Unless you do a shit job, then you should be replaced with AI. No hard feelings. Anyway, I'm gonna slowly, methodically walk, not run, through Final Fantasy IX looking for anything I've never personally noticed or just interesting oddities. You know, make up for all those years of content skimming. As the game begins, you're instructed to light a candle in the middle of a pitch black room, but walking around I find 2 items I didn't know were there, as well as a write-up about the construction of the airship we're on, the Prima Vista. In this, we learn that it's considered a luxury liner with a theatre and has a maximum capacity of 288 people. Now, the tonnage is 8,200, and I tried to suss out how they'd measure this, as to my understanding, modern ships measure all kinds of different tonnages from deadweight to volume, and even by how much water it displaces, and it all factors into taxes and shit. Exciting stuff. However, I don't think you're measuring an airship based on the amount of air it displaces, and the volume of the Prima Vista doesn't seem that large, so what kind of figure are we dealing with here? Is it the total weight? Are we talking 8 million kilograms, like 17, 18 million pounds just for the ship? I know this is a fantasy game, but given that modern commercial aircraft have maximum takeoff weights of like 1/10 of this, I'm gonna call bullshit. That said, you've got a lot of wood and big steel contraptions, and that shit's heavy. Have you ever tried to lift a tree? I'm clearly not a ship guy or a plane guy, and I'm putting way too much faith in the websites I got these figures from. And also, you know, fantasy airships are just that. But I think we can safely say, myth busted, Final Fantasy is not real. And taking the role of Vivi in the city of Alexandria, we head back a screen to find a few NPCs idling. The 2 in the centre are nobles, who make explicit mention of how Vivi is neither a city child nor a noble, which is, I think it's fairly evident. The bird lady comments on how the street urchins are annoying, implying that the nobles very rarely make trips to where commoners are, which is a significant note for a later city. In a house down the lane, there's a woman weaving a dress, and her husband accuses her of spoiling her grandkids, so we steal her savings, a whopping 9 gil. This text box goes out of its way to tell you that it's grandma's savings too, like, it wants you to feel shitty. The tiny black mage can also observe a tapestry and fall over as the pattern makes him dizzy. Did you know that there are people out there, no, not people, demons, mentally ill demons who hate Vivi? They've clearly never explored with him, because he's adorable. Look at this little fucking dude. Wanna pinch his cheeks. Does he have cheeks? Dunno. Moving further down the alley, 4 kids run through at set intervals, and 2 of them are tied together, so to speak. When you stop the little girl with the balloon from moving, her friend Theodore will wait for her to continue on, and the girl also waits in kind. It's pretty sweet. We find Theo and his girlfriend in the next scene, but he doesn't wait this time. What happened between then and now? Is that another man's balloon? If we walk to the back of the residential area, the girl who helped us with our ticket earlier is seen running around in front of her house. Ilya is the granddaughter of the dress weaver and is home alone for some reason, so we wait for her to leave to access the top floor and then steal her life savings too. A whopping 3 gil. See, this is why people love Vivi, right? He's not afraid to steal from the poor and vulnerable. A sign's posted on the outside of her house which alludes to a class struggle, instructing the poor and downtrodden to assemble on the roofs of their abodes for a free showing of the noble-oriented play. There's tensions between the wealthy and the commoners, which you wouldn't immediately pick up from just walking around. It seems pretty peaceful. I guess it's just bubbling and likely a reflection of the growing displeasure of their rulers' shifting attitude. We can also steal a secret stash of cards from this chapel's bell, which I knew, but I always forget to do. Heading back to the square, we enter the inn to find a man screaming about not being able to get a room, and Hippol, a humanoid hippo child, is reeling from the cards we just stole. That is an important life lesson. A much safer place to hide your valuables is on your person, because that way they have to kill you to take them. In the synthesis store, the owner informs us that he's going to the show tonight, and his wife elaborates on this, detailing how hard it is to get a ticket. They state that they worked their asses off for 30 years and can finally afford to go. It's an expensive ticket, no wonder people are leading cute little rebellions over something they feel entitled to. We're not like them, we're better than they are, and we have a ticket. So let's go use it. Unfortunately, the big wolf guy tells us it's fake, but he also goes on about how pretty Princess Garnet is for a strange amount of time, particularly given it's her 16th birthday. I'm sorry mate, you don't have a shot. Even if you're a dog. Upon learning our ticket's fake, we go back to see Mick, who was envious of our acquisition moments prior, and he gets mad at the thought of someone selling a fake ticket to a kid. You're a real bro, Mick. So far, we've assembled a pretty solid cast of characters and have a decent idea about how the residents act. My in-game time is just shy of an hour. This is gonna be a long playthrough. I'm definitely not getting that Excalibur 2. Also, is that a big nose on the ladder well? I think it's supposed to be like a spearhead or something, but it looks like a big sniffer. No, it must have been full of oil. Running across the roofs, there are many back streets we don't get to explore, but it's all pretty standard stuff for a big city. The moat between the central area and the castle itself also extends far into the residential district. I wonder if that's castle runoff or if the water comes from somewhere else. Whatever the case, these people are probably disease-stricken and full of leeches. Not unlike yours truly. The cutscene where Tantalus are kicking off the performance shows a close-up of Bran, as well as Vivi and Puck, the rat kid, all with obscured faces. I kinda dig how half the cast have hidden features. It adds a unique charm to their design, and by extension, their personalities. Baku's got his goggles, Blank's got his stitched leather face skin, Marcus's eyes are hidden under his bandana. We never see any of the Black Mage's faces, or are they just floating features? We'll never know. Then of course, Bran's eyes are shadowed by her large, low-sitting crown, and Puck has a tiny split in his onion cap, presumably to hide his true identity, and of course Beatrix, who has a steel patch on the right side of her face. It's a cool way to give a character some character. How do you make one anime boy different to another? A hat? A new color? Nah, fuck that, that's baby shit. Completely hiding some of their features gives them a memorable design. It also speaks to how hard they went when resolutions were very low. You could tell who was who in an instant because of that effort. Like, look at Cinna's face. My god, they sacrificed this man. Compared to this, like, modern designs suck. There's no other way around it. JRPG characters nowadays are so fucking safe. Like, oh, don't make my character too ugly, how will I come? Not at all. We switch perspectives now to Steiner, my boy, and in the room where Zidane and Blank beat up some guards, we find a registry of all the Knights of Pluto. All 9 of them? In the dining hall, we find a Plutonian knight chowing down, with Steiner remarking that this is why nobody takes men seriously, alluding to an issue of sex in the Kingdom of Alexandria, as well as shining some light on how Bran and Beatrix rule and command. As we know, the Alexandrian knights are all female, you can see from their, titties, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, how are they keeping the population high when all the females are on active guard duty and not cranking out children? It had never occurred to me before that maybe the battle of the sexes is less of a gender divide and more of a necessity. The last major war Alexandria was involved in was slightly more than 20 years ago. I don't think the exact time is explicitly mentioned, but there's a plaque on the road between Dali and Treno, which is a monument to 20 years of peace between Lindblom and Alexandria. This obviously wasn't built the same day as the game begins, so we can presume it's at least a couple years old, maybe closer to a decade or two given the levels of trust between the general public. There's a good chance this war wiped out large swaths of military-aged men, and despite decades passing, the kingdom could still have a shortage, requiring them to train their excess female demographic to pick up the country's defenses. After all, you still need men who don't serve to pick up the domestic slack and, provide penis. For example, who would take the bins out, clean the sewers, drive without crashing. Back to the lunch table. Steiner can also snackle upon a morsel or two on the opposite table as he speaks of how good Alexandrian food is, playing into his core character trait of being loyal to a fault. He's audibly jerking off his own country while no one's around to listen, a true schizophrenic patriot. Quina can also be found in the kitchen helping all the chefs prepare food, and he seems to be the head chef. If you stay long enough, he'll shout orders of encouragement at the others, to which they're receptive. I also just noticed that they're all black. I'm at a loss for words, but I think you know the one I'm after. Entering the library and speaking to the scholars foreshadows a few later events, such as one mentioning that Bran had asked for books on the Eidolons and Garnet inquired about the script for the play I Want to Be Your Canary. This backwardly justifies how she can enter the play midway through and blend in seamlessly, as she does only a few scenes later. Not that it needed justification, but it's a cool mention. Out by the docks, the female Alexandrian soldiers show Steiner respect, so the sex divide may be more of a personal insecurity from Rusty than what I previously thought, though based on how inept the Knights of Pluto seem, something's going on here. Alexandria is experiencing its soft guy era. Chugging over to the airship interior, during the battle scene there's a lot of little props and whatnot for all the kinds of shows that Tantalus would put on. You've got masks and the like. I've never really stopped to notice these, they've always just kind of existed in the background, which ironically enough is their role to play. I've also never come to terms with the fact that the group are primarily thieves, but to execute their thievery they have to put on frilly little dresses and perform. They seem like such down-to-earth, grizzled dudes. It's hard to imagine them being flamboyant and whimsical on stage. I wonder if that was lost in translation, or if they're truly eccentrics and we only really see it at the beginning and whenever Sinner's around. Actually, come to think of it, how are you consistently getting work when you're stealing shit? You got this big fuck-off airship, so you only play to people who can afford you, but then you rob them blind. Unless the scrap you pilfer is what funds operations, I don't know. I feel like the Prima Vista would have a huge upkeep cost, and, despite their most recent job being well paid as they're employed by a country's leader to kidnap a princess, I don't think Baku's on Sid's payroll. That said, mist is the fuel, and that's free. Any ship upkeep is clearly done by the boys, as they're seen being quite handy multiple times. Maybe it is cheap to run an airship in this world. It's a convenient thought as they crash into an otherwise uninteresting forest. Escaping the forest, the crew exits to the bottom of a basin, and there's a gate called the Melder Arch, with the Alexandrian war banner flying, enough footprints for someone to mention them, and plumes of smoke are visible just over the gate. Given that this place doesn't physically exist in the world, who could say what's beyond? Apparently it connects to the gate found just outside of Bermesia, so we're assuming the Alexandrian forces took this route to invade the rat-infested city. When we see them in Gizamalug's grotto, much later, they're likely coming back toward Lindblum to exterminate the few fleeing rats. Did they solely head through the grotto to give chase, or was it a potential way to sneak into Lindblum and were simply stopped by Zidane? It never made much sense to me that the mages would arrive on the Lindblum side, as they'd already torn the rear of the cave up and they're heading toward the entrance as we arrive, so unless I'm missing something critical, that is a detail I'd never even considered before. In hindsight, it seems extremely evident. Maybe I'm just retarded. Whatever the case, they're clearly not scared of retaliation from Lindblum, as they don't seem to care about entering their territory with a squad of war golems. Back to our linear timeline, we waltz through the ice cavern and come to the first Black Waltz. I've always questioned why he can summon sea lions and none of the other waltzes seem to have any backup. Maybe they're just really confident in their own abilities, but it does seem odd. Shortly after, we enter a rural farm town by the name of Dali. There's menus everywhere, one in the foyer of the inn and two in the bar, and as far as I can tell, there's only one other menu in the whole game, and it's in a crappy food joint in the industrial district of Lindblum. Outside of detailing what the townsfolk eat, I wonder if this alludes to a shift from a farming town to more of a tourism-focused endeavour. Given Dali's in-breakfast menu says this is a sample menu at the bottom, means it's likely a placeholder or a tester before they went ahead with the real deal. The boys in Dali love their veggie stir-fry and pumpkin salad, as it's constantly sold out. This could also indicate how low the vegetable supply is now that most of their farmland is gone. The list of alcohols always seems in stock, and they make liqueur out of Geisel, like chocobo food. I wasn't going to use wikis for this video, I wanted it to be authentic, grassroots, underground, but the concept of this fascinated me, so I did a bit of research and apparently the pickles sold in Lindblum are just Geisel. So people are eating and drinking this shit. Bro, it's bird food. There are get-rich-quick books on the Dali Inn bookshelf, How to Save 1 Million Gil, Earn Money the Easy Way, and Making Crazy Money Volume 2, and Zidane thinks these books suck. He's not wrong, if you've got to write a Volume 2 of a get-rich-quick book, it clearly didn't work the first time. Unless you were the author. This is a nice inclusion as it shows how desperate the mayor is to keep his town prosperous despite an ostensible lower demand of farm goods. On the other side of the room, there's a colour divination game, which Zidane notes was popular a few years ago, kinda like an astrology reading. This is a nice little reminder of how culture and fads took years to kind of funnel out of cities and countries before we were hyper-connected all the time. On God, for real, no cap. If you head to the farm with Zidane, he makes notes that what used to be farmland in the distance is now strange crop circle patterns in the grass. The garden itself is modest as well, with only a handful of vegetables, alluding to Dali's shift in economic prosperity with the Black Mage exports. The villagers must either not need a lot of food, or they import their food from more wealthy countries with the Black Mage money. They have a handful of chocobos as well, and I wonder if they ate them like cattle in the before times. Actually, come to think of it, what do the citizens of Final Fantasy IX eat? You never see cows or sheep, there's no visible animal husbandry outside of the chocobo at Dali. Do they have hunters who kill fiends and eat their meat? And if so, what happens to the meat population when the mist dissipates? Where do they get their vitamin A from? The sample menu from the Dali Inn explicitly mentions eggs, but eggs of what? Chocobo eggs? Black Mage eggs? We're missing key pieces of information. What do these people eat? If you look at the Festival of the Hunt banquet from a few scenes in the future, there's clearly a bird of some kind, possibly a turkey, maybe a chocobo. I guess we're not supposed to question it, and I never have, which is the call of good environmental design. If it doesn't stick out, it works, but I can't unsee it now. Think back to when you first played Final Fantasy IX. Did you ever think that you'd be listening to a schizophrenic on the internet, talking about what the people in the game eat, the fictional people, and the fictional food that doesn't matter at all? Anyway, back to Dali. I'm guessing their mist generator under the ground was set up either by the court jesters or Kuja and exports black mages for shipping. I don't know why they didn't do it closer to Alexandria, as Dali is a border town. The castle's full of hidden nooks and crannies, and the landmass surrounding it is huge. It could be that Bran didn't want dangerous weapons so close to her kingdom, possibly alluding to some form of responsibility left in her power-addled brain. Or it could be about mist concentration. When Garnet comes up from the ice cavern, she makes note of the sunshine, implying that the mist is thicker closer to the ground, barely letting any light through. This begs the question of how such insane vegetation exists if it can't photosynthesize, but maybe because it's evil, it plays by different rules. If you look at the cutscene after they escape from the evil forest, during the close-up shot as they look back, you can see dead trees behind them. So I guess just certain foliage thrives, while others doesn't. I'm not a botanist, this could make total sense, but it seems weird. The mist machine in the underground has a funnel of mist coming through into vacuums, which then use it to produce eggs. This funnel is likely a root from the ether trees. We know they run deep through the mist continent and are responsible for its creation. I mean, we should know that, it was a major plot point. We've all played Final Fantasy IX, right? Okay, so back to the Black Waltzes. You can tell from their visual design their respective level of refinement. Black Waltz 1, clearly a prototype, as even in his visual design, he's so sloppy. His arms are too long for his hunched goblin body and they drag along the ground. His pants have images of snowflakes, which indicate his element and volatile disposition, though none of the other mages marry an element like that. Black Waltzes 2 and 3 have elements, they're just not in love with them. They also stand upright, but even the second has a slight hunch, making the incremental improvements immediately evident. He lacks the confidence of the third. The third is tall, he's proud, he's like a powerful human, a more refined mage brew, but the first is literally stitched together. His shirt's raggedy and barely fits, and his hat's made of poorly baled straw. The second is a little more fancy, got a nice coat, got that hat with the feather on top, as well as horns. Do the horns come from his head, or are they a part of the hat? Who knows? However, the bottom of his undergarments are tattered, and the ends of his wings are singed, which could be visual theming for his preference for fire elemental attacks, or, maybe his creators were still perfecting the brew. And finally, the third has this expensive jacket, very fashionable, his clothes are immaculate, wings strong and proud, there is nothing about this guy that looks half complete at all, which is why him being an absolute unhinged psychopath makes perfect sense. Despite his completeness, his proportions are still that of a mangled demonic beast. The narrow waist and massive shoulders make no sense. Where are his organs? Dude's lats are working overtime to prop up those boulders. God damn, he's got a wider V than Steiner's mother. Even in a game like Final Fantasy IX, where everyone has weird proportions, he sticks out like a sore thumb. After the fight with the third waltz, we see Zorn and Thorn, the twin court jesters, in a modest air cruiser. They're so small that they have to control one side of the steering wheel each, as the red one warns that the ship will become unstable if the blue one lets go. That'd almost be adorable if I didn't hate them so much. I love how after the third waltz explodes on Southgate, you get a small overworld shot of the airship flying to Lindblom. It shows a bit more of the scope and cements the normalization of airships in the world, as you can see the others in the background. There's one which had landed on a large isolated rock and seems to take off as you approach. What are they hiding? It does this little wobble as it takes flight. It's such a small detail that didn't need to exist. Nobody would question it either way, but they did it, and I noticed it. Pat me on the back. Right now. Arriving in Lindblom, we're ushered off to meet with the Regent Cid. If you stray a little bit, you can actually pass one of the head engineers, this Chrono Trigger looking guy running out of the air cab towards the dated airship we flew in on. I've legitimately never seen this scene. Walking is paying off. As you awake in the inn and head down the stairs, you can see a review posted, which reads, "The room was terrible. Also that thing crying Kupo Kupo kept me up all night. Throw him out ASAP or I'm never coming back." This review was posted by Lani, a bounty hunter from later in the game, as she's in Lindblom for the Festival of the Hunt. It's a neat little addition that I've never connected to the character. Even villains have opinions of lodgings, I guess. Walking on the world map, you can enter a place called Pinnacle Rocks, which will be significant later, but for now we can only access the small front section. However, you get a lovely shot of Lindblom as a whole from the outside. The perspective seems a little off, I think it should be bigger, but what a landscape, goddamn. Crawling through the city itself, I noticed that Lindblom's head chef is another one of those little black guys. How am I just noticing this? I wonder if they pay him or if they traded a warlord some gunpowder like 200 years ago. And here we are, hanging out at Pepe's milk shop. Wait, milk? From what? It says they do the farming on the Lindblom Plateau, but I don't see any cows or farmland. Are they milking Ramu? What the fuck? Walking through the industrial district, we'll find a statue of Cid VIII, or the current regent Cid IX's father. From what info we can find, this man was a force of nature that not only invented the mist engine, but also popularized it to such a degree that the sky is full of airships, and it's used in all sorts of other places like Dali to create fiery war golems, but ignore that, he's a hero. This fella also owned a cat, which spawned a wave of copycats who thought that it was good juju to own a feline if you were an engineer. Since Lindblom is an engineer-friendly city, you'll notice many houses with cats, particularly in the back of the industrial district. One such kitty-owning man is working on a steam engine that doesn't require mist to run. It's a genuinely sick world detail that all the engineers behave in particular ways based on the influence of a character we never see. That influence was so strong it carried through and took on a life of its own that's a part of the world whether you know it or not. Though I guess that's kind of how history works, right? In the current SIDS audience room, there are 3 pieces of equipment on the wall donned by former SIDS and crafted by people named things like Fabrizio. Very nice. Going to the Serpent's Gate before you leave for Gizamaluk's Grotto gives you some insight into how Sid VIII changed transportation. The guards waddling around the docks talk about how it was once a bustling port, people coming and going, but with the advent of airships, no one uses boats anymore. It's crazy to think how that level of expansion happened in such a short period, where presumably young men clearly remember what it was like before one man led a technological revolution. The guard at the end of the docks is choking from the mist, implying there's a thickness to it, like a smoke and not a steam. The mist certainly seems to collect in particular areas, as later in the game there's a more detailed area map which explicitly says it's thicker in certain places, referring to it as deep fog. What's also interesting is that airships can utilize it at such high altitudes, particularly if it dissipates to the point where you can easily see through it and get more sunshine. Airships would require a lot of power, so we've either got incredibly efficient engines or the mist is like so energy dense even in its diluted state. Given that it creates powerful monsters, it's probably a bit of both, and due to the fact that it does create monsters, you probably can't store it on board. This old bastard in the bar, let's refer to him as Pickle Pop, mentions how his wife is hooked on selling pickles. He states, "Sometimes I think she loves her pickles more than me." Bro, that's crazy, some of those pickles are huge! If you speak to Grandma Pickle after Garnet and Steiner escape, she'll mention how she's only had a single customer despite the traffic arriving for the Festival of the Hunt. That one customer was of course your boy Albert Einsteiner, and everyone clapped and gave him 50 gil, yeah! We hit up the head chef after the party's drugged and he explicitly mentions that he didn't use any sleeping medicine in the food. I don't know, man, aren't you people known for your drug use? I'm gonna be real, I've never seen a head chef who wasn't bleeding from the nostrils. There's a stall in this same map called Polom's Action Figures, a reference to the White Mage from Final Fantasy IV, and she's got signage up that mentions Brahms are now in stock. I guess when you've got such colourful figures, who needs fictional ones? This is another small tip-off that old wounds between kingdoms have healed, as if you still had people who knew the bitter taste of war, you wouldn't normalise the literal idolization of these powerful figures. Before we leave, we check in on this happy family who was previously a girl and her parents, but the father's missing. He's, off to war. Will he return? I don't know, I'll keep you updated. An old fella named Locke just outside the cable car station gives us a little hint about the Chocobo Forest, but does so through the veil of a story of his younger years, the best years of his life when he was barebacking a Chocobo and oh god. When we hit the aforementioned Chocobo Forest, the Moogle says Chocobo bond with their rider and only have one, but that he saved the bird from a bad former owner. Who was this owner? Was it Locke? Filthy bastard. Mene, the Moogle, when asked if a beautiful girl had been past the forest, states that he'd only seen an ugly one. I don't know who that's supposed to be, I can't imagine Bran's wading through the swamp on foot. Maybe he's referencing Lani. Nah, Lani's a bomb, there's no way. I can't think of who else it'd be. Quinn is a dude, even if the game plays it off like he's gender ambiguous, he can't equip female equipment and the game specifically calls him him. He could be calling Freya ugly to her face, but he's still alive, so that can't be it. I stopped here to reskim the footage. I had to get to the bottom of who the ugly girl was, and it's Garnet. As she takes a seat on the car connecting Lindblom and Alexandria, Steiner mentions that it was her fortitude that got them past the obnoxious Moogles in Chocobo Forest. The gate connecting the flats under Lindblom to the gate they passed through is adjacent to Chocobo Forest, so I guess that makes sense. Garnet got absolutely checked by a fucking Moogle, bro. Just like, holy shit. In Southgate, Carpenter Hans informs us that there's rumours of ghosts and he's unsure of how the gate exploded in the first place, alluding to a cover-up. This makes sense, Bran can't exactly say, oh yeah, my demonic sentient war machine exploded trying to capture the princess. The chief engineer informs us that once he's done with this job, he's being put on the team working on the mist-free engine, with the hopes to explore the continents that are void of mist, as they're largely undocumented. Despite the advent of aviation, the world is still heavily isolated and barely connected, as only one continent contains mist. We also speak to jobless Jeff, who just declared bankruptcy and departed his shop that sold magical trinkets. Then we speak to part-time worker Mary, who can't believe what's happened to our boy Jeff. Steiner consoles her, and in doing so inspires Mary to encourage Jeff to suck it up and rebound. Right into her. Hard cut to the Rat Kingdom, and can you believe there wasn't like a single thing that I found interesting in Burmecia? I guess the weird way the housing structures are laid out, I don't know if these are hotels or if they just build their cities like warrens because they're rats. I think that's just how city people live. At the summit station, the operator gives us a vague description of how the cable cars work. They're powered by mist, but they also rely on one another to pull or be pulled. When one is at the top, the other's at the bottom, so it seems like they're effectively connected by a rope and given some engine-based encouragement. Checking the signage here, and hang on, that says Lindbaum. Landing in Alexandrian territory, we see part-time worker Mary again, saying that she laments having to leave Jeff, but she's got work to do. If you're keeping up with Mognet, the Moogle mail delivery system, the letter from Grimo to the resident Moogle Nazna is about Mary. It mentions how it's difficult to watch someone else fall in love, and whether Moogles are more than just food. No, it doesn't say that. Fucking snapped you out of your funk though, didn't it? Sit up straight, your posture sucks. On the cable car, Mary mentions how she's going to work hard to help Jeff open another shop. Get you someone who loves you unconditionally like Mary bros. She's out there, and we're all gonna make it. Once we arrive, she'll be manning the item shop Vega, but only sells a small helping of generic consumables. Taking a little walk back to Dali, we skim the statue begging us not to vandalize the farm, then head to the spire and find a delivery instruction sheet. It tells of how deliveries are to be made every 2 days, with no deliveries on the Sabbath. I wonder if this is for a religious reason, or maybe the tyrant, Queen Bran, values rest and relaxation. She seems very well rested to me. It also gives brief protocol for emergencies and mist density. I love shit like this. If Garnet examines the mini Prima Vista, she wonders to herself if Tantalus are just bandits who steal wherever they go. I mean, surely it's evident by now. When entering the village, Garnet remarks that it feels like it's been forever, alluding that her time with Steiner may have been more tougher than we're privy to, which Steiner kinda mentions on the cable cars. The breakfast menu has been updated and is ostensibly a real menu now, with a disclaimer text saying, "Sorry, no breakfast service today." Gee, I wonder why that could be. Garnet also has different dialogue regarding the get-rich-quick books, questioning what crazy money means. It's nice that despite what she's been through, Garnet still has a sheltered side that comes out, particularly this early in the game. Like, this princess doesn't understand what it means to need money that much that they would trust a shitty book like this. Aiding in her social seclusion, she mentions that she's heard of color charms, but never seen the real thing before. If you talk to the bloke guarding the entrance to the Black Mage basement, he'll ask Dagger if she'd like to go to the observatory with him, but laments that the last time he slacked off, people snuck in, so he's unable to. Garnet's internal monologue states that he sounds just like Zidane, and how she used to be embarrassed when he talked to her in his casual manner, but doesn't feel that anymore. Conversing with the lady in the field, if we reply that Bran has gone too far in her power grab, our princess swears that she'll get this lady's farm back, and upon inspecting the crop circle, states that it's only been a few days since she piloted the cargo ship. Heading back to the ice cavern, we're unable to re-enter for some reason as it's melting and has become unstable. I wonder if the first Black Waltz was keeping it in its frozen state, which makes sense given the waterfall starts flowing again once he's felled. There is a book in Alexandria which briefly mentions the cave, and I can't imagine a book would exist for something so short-term and volatile. Though I've seen books about how to hit the griddy in Fortnite, so that's depressing. I do wonder why it's melting outside of the developers not wanting to add extra flags to a dungeon that could function completely unchanged. That said, if you went back to the basin, they could just re-enter Alexandria through the arches at the base of the cliff, and that would be too easy. We'd never have our Treno date with Marcus. Before heading to Treno, I waltz over to Quan's dwelling, and while Garnet doesn't have any unique dialogue, I've legitimately never noticed Vivi's egg before. Quan clearly tried to fry it or boil it, as there's a pot and a frying pan right next to it. Once in Treno, you'll immediately see a class divide. The rich spend time and money at their auctions where they vastly overspend on trinkets I could really use to save the world, and then there's the poor who live in slums and shanty houses. The locals admit it is not a safe city, and you can find gil dropped in the upper class area, with some NPCs flat out refusing to talk to you, likely a self-preservation tactic. Honestly, I don't blame them. While on the other side of the map, we find people repairing houses and a band of LARPing toddlers who talk about a class uprising. In the inn, there's a bounty poster for Amaranth for 10,000 gil. That seems awfully low, but maybe I just don't know the value of a good bounty. That's only like 500 Dali breakfasts with their mystery eggs. Jumping across to Clara, a giant isolated tree, the priestesses here speak of the Burmesian Split, where the city rats found a taste for war and the Clarans fled up the trunk, creating a giant sandstorm to protect themselves. Nobody had entered for 100 years, so they've just been in here, festering, inbreeding, just being gross in general, which is odd because they're also the most attractive mice. Peace is a great ideal. It's the end game of every utopia because it brings with it a perpetual resource surplus which kills any desire to take from your neighbor. But it's naive. It always ignores the introduction of new, more finite resources and, human nature, or rat nature, I guess. It's a childish desire. Not a bad one, just unrealistic. And we see that as eidolons are a hot commodity. Due to their continued militarization, Burmecia could actually push back against Alexandria a little bit, but the Clarins had to lie down and take it.
Oh, boo-hoo, a black mage set me on fire.
Oh man, if only you had the means to defend yourself from a tyranny or invaders. Just before Clara is blown to shit, the black mages get in these ethereal, transparent baubles and disappear into the sky. You get in this pod and can instantly warp anywhere, but they still use ships and airships and legs. Like, what's going on here? Why do we never see this technology again? Now, as I said, I'm not using the run button for this playthrough. I wanted to look around during the second trip to Alexandria Castle, but I am unfortunately on a 30-minute timer, and I can't outrun any of the posted guards, so I gotta book it straight to the objective. Sound off if there's any epic gamer content, and smash like and subscribe and rate the video, check out my merch store and Patreon. So Bran gets a bit uppity and kinda summons a little eidolon on Lindblom, but it's not like a big one or anything, it's not like a blowy uppy one, it's more of a vacuum. She's just cleaning the population, cleansing them. So anyway, she's in charge now and has placed troops throughout the demolished area, keeping citizens under a tight watch. Exploring the wreckage, we find the little girl from earlier whose father was off to war, and she's now lost both her mother and her father. Returning to the inn, and Lani's review has been replaced with a message from a guy named Dylan, who saw that he rented a room just as a war broke out and wants a refund. Well, that's what you get for being called Dylan. The weapon store owner mentions that he's fleecing Alexandrian occupiers, which is very based, and if you look at the sign the soldier's staring at, it lists prices. This dude is out here taxing thoughts, Godspeed. A few of the Alexandrian soldiers are worried about the eidolons and black mages, one saying she feels like Pandora's box has been opened. Sure, once opened, you can never close Pandora's box, but if you'd smelled that thing, no one's going near it anyway. Another speaks of a group called the Vigilantes, presumably an anti-Alexandrian rebel force, and if we find a man called Justin, she says Nicole tells him to stop. After seeing Regent Sid, then returning, we find Justin, who says he will fight Nicole. Nicole is not happy. As far as I can see, the Vigilante group are never mentioned again, and we get no real resolution to this. Heading to the theater district, the little girl has found her mother, but the father was in the industrial district, which a man further down says he saw completely vanish. Yeah, he did. The struggling artist in the studio finds an Alexandrian soldier looking at his painting. He's unsure of her intentions, but she takes a liking to his work, after which he says he was going to attack her from behind, but people who like good art are good people. I can actually vouch for that. I know this one Austrian guy loved good art. I do dig how this Lindblom occupation scene humanizes the occupiers a little bit. Sure, you could say they're just doing their job, and sure, you could say that doing that job makes them complicit, but the fact that they speak with Zidane and air their grievances over their commander's actions while revealing their kinda personalities and fears reminds you that we're all valid and beautiful. Now stand still while this black mage sets you on fire. The theater district has been blown to shreds, so we see Lowell, the actor, standing near the destroyed stairs, lamenting his career prospects. We received a letter from Ruby Pryor stating that she's so desperate for good actors in Alexandria, she would even take Lowell, so we informed the flamboyant man and off he jaunts. And finally, an Alexandrian soldier informs Zidane that Bran wants to build an opera house in this area of Lindblom, implying she's already making plans to rebuild the city to suit her own taste. Before we head to the new continent, I want to quickly take a peek in Gizamaluk's grotto again. All the dead rat corpses have been cleaned up, and I wonder if this was a Lindblom post-war effort to honor the dead, or if the Quans from the swamp got a bit hungry. The swamp is awfully close to the grotto. And the Moogles here have had sex. I repeat, the Moogles have had sex. It adds a whole new meaning to the term Kupo nut. As I'm beholden to the no running clause, getting away from this giant jousting machine proves tough, and I end up fighting him 3 times before I end the gauntlet. Still worth it though. Underground in Fossil Rue, there's a miner who lets you borrow his pickaxe for a potion. Before this, he states he's surprised we made it this far in without getting hurt, so this dude's clearly taken some damage arriving in this spot and seems pretty desperate for that heal. He's literally trusting you with his livelihood. Rarely do you see NPCs scrapping with monsters in JRPGs, so I like to imagine he's not roughed up from the act of mining, but from punching on with these weird hair shoe guys. I do a cheeky explore of the outer continent, but all that's here is a swamp, which is almost exactly the same as the one we were just in, looking for rat corpses. However, when we arrive at Kondipidi, which I'm calling that because the Japanese name is Kondoyapata, and that's stupid, we find some epic discoveries you'd only find in a goblin sanctuary. This is an elevated treehouse of sorts, sandwiched between a cliff and a mountain. When asking the dwarves why they chose this spot, they'll confess to being a highly religious bunch who are in touch with nature. They love the water, their connection to the mountains and the sun is important, and this seems like a prime spot to have everything they wanted. They're primitive, they eat owls and oglops, and if you go behind the lady who greets us at the front entrance, you can actually be caught checking her out. To which she turns and expresses flattery, then refers to herself as comely. So while they're highly conservative and drowning in tradition, they also fuck, and they fuck hard. Marriage is an important part of their society. They join in a union to receive the blessing of the sun, then take a trip to the sanctuary to engrave their names, forever, cementing their bond. Most dwarves will speak highly of the sun and its influence on their small society, as well as trying to marry off any who are left single. You can tell from their faces they're highly inbred, and given that their accents were translated as Scottish, I'd say the translators knew what they were doing. Dwarven surnames are based on what they do. We got Fruitbringer, he brings fruit. Gatekeeper, he keeps gates. Gibgabber, he gabs gibs. Cockbeater, you get the idea. As we leave to chase the painty hats, we look at this post down the main stalk with rocks and vines growing through it. Zidane ponders if the vines grew through the rocks or if the rocks were forced in place, then wonders how they built the roof of the town. Probably with their hands. Over in the Black Mage village, you can find some paintings on the wall of the inn, with mages 234 and 123 having painted them. One is titled A Walk in the Forest, while the other is Our Village. They say paint what you know, and these young souls don't know much. I can't wait for their future works, melting Lindblom Child's face and sodomy with silver-haired twinks. The story railroads hard from here, until I clear the Aoife tree and then the mist dissipates. I head back to the elevator halfway up the tree, and while you can't re-enter, it is nice to see these maps without the mist. You only come back here once as a part of the story and never this far in, so creating mist-free maps that almost nobody will ever see is a much appreciated touch. Why would anyone make the trek back unless they forgot something or had a mental breakdown and turned it into a video? Skipping back to Alexandria, not much has changed. A kid's lamenting his lost cat again, while others run through the streets. If you head to the inn, you'll find the mayor of Dali arguing with a fishman about the price of a room and getting absolutely fleeced. The girl from behind the bar and ostensibly her brother and mother are all witness to the fish fight. We also find out the fish is parent to a hippo, and his wife is also a hippo. It's a weird world. A man, walking past the tavern, notes that he's working to join the Knights of Pluto and that he thinks they're good fighters. Whether they are or not remains to be seen, but given that you later assign them to help towns members, it always struck me as odd that you'd tell incompetent soldiers to go into an active war zone and help civilians. Maybe this guy's correct and we're vastly underestimating the Knights of Pluto. The old lady from the start who was making a dress for her granddaughter is still working on it, and her husband is not happy that it's taken so much of her time. Another high-value man in the streets mentions that Garnet's too young to be queen and thinks Beatrix would have been a better pick. And I'd be her king. On the docks, there's a chef who states that he doesn't know what to cook for Princess Garnet's coronation and wishes the former head chef, who was in charge during her birthday prep, would come back. Oh, he misses Queener! Oh, how cute! Wouldn't it be, crazy if they just, kissed and, just licked each other's feet? Wouldn't that be weird? The Proletariat Rise Up sign in the alley near the chapel has been changed to a donation begging operation. That is the natural progression. As Zidane, we meet the Wolf Ticketmaster from the beginning of the game, and as he looks down on Vivi, I'd expect him to be huge, but he's actually quite stout. Another colourful character from the beginning, the Bird Guy, who leads the nobles through town, is jobless when there are no events, and asks the player if they know of anything he could do. Fly south, brother. It's job winter. From Treno, if you head through the gates at the mountain pass and head back to the cable car area, they're obviously non-functional because there's no mist. This means there would have been a handful of poor souls trapped at the rest stop with few options to get down. Some say they're still surviving on stale bunt cake to this day. Anyway, part-time worker Mary is here with your boy Jeff, and speaking to them you'll discover they're a couple. How nice for them. Going back to Dali shows the adults in a state. The factory shut down and the farm is still not up and running. A kid in the main street says that he doesn't have to do anything and is free to play, while the farm tending lady admits to being demotivated and considers leaving the farm as is. At least one adult has also turned to the drink, the innkeeper and Mayor's brother, this guy, I don't know his name. The bartender denies you alcohol and says the guy in the corner's an exception. They're just enabling this poor bastard to drink himself to death as he rants about how he screwed up his chances with Garnet. Sorry, when did that happen? Did I miss something? In the weapons store, the parent asks if you'd watch the store for a week while she takes her daughter on a vacation. You can answer either way, and the question can only be answered once, but of course I'll watch your weapon store, lady. Also added to the prompt on the wall is some sort of formula for how the card game mechanics work. It states that cards get stronger as you use them, which not only did I not know, but I feel like I should have. The people are right, Tetramaster sucks. Back to Alexandria. After Bahamut's attack, you can move around the castle and advise people to leave, specifically the chefs and the old slumped over scholars. I don't know if this does anything, it doesn't seem to, maybe it just raises your cred in Dahood and Academia also. Once that's all over, you'll end up back in Lindblom, and if we head to the inn again to check the review, it's blank. So Zidane pens his own. His review is glowing, he loves the Moogle and the proximity to the air cab station, he just wishes it were cheaper. I grabbed the mountain chocobo to scope out the world map view of Alexandria, and you can really see how much damage Bahamut did. He's completely wiped the outer chunks that Alexander couldn't quite protect. Walking through the remains, everyone seems to be doing a good job rebuilding. One kid says he feels icky from not having a shower, and that grandmother's still stressing about the young girl's dress, though the kid doesn't seem to care. The grumpy old husband blames himself for the dress never being complete, showing that the mass destruction and death has humbled everyone and reframed their worlds. You know, as that tends to do. On the way to the inn, we see a soldier who says that due to the Knights of Pluto being so coordinated, there weren't that many casualties. I do wonder if you mess that section up if the dialogue changes, but I don't want to replay it to find out. Another happening at the inn, the fishman is once again overwhelmed by red mages, but has no room to offer them. As it's ever escalating, Hippol runs in and sorts it all, giving the customers a 20% discount no less. The fish guy sucks at managing a business. The red mages compliment the kid and say they can't wait till he's the inn master. If you reload the area, the hippo mum says she's so proud of her little dude, and honestly, he stopped playing cards, which is something to be proud of. That's the old-timey equivalent of watching anime, and he's kicked that bad habit. Lowell appears in Ruby's theatre, but you don't get a lot from either of them. Bit of an anticlimax there. After the events with Kuja and reclaiming the Hildegard, we can walk to the secondary airship dock within Lindblom Castle. Here, we find the guy from the industrial district who was working on the steam engine in his workshop. Not only did he survive the complete destruction of the industrial district, he's also helping Sid on his next big technological leap. Good for you, fella. I did a cheeky scour of the world all the way up to Disc 4, or when you return to Gaia from Terra, and honestly, didn't find anything super noteworthy. It gets pretty story intense, so there's not much to miss. Upon arriving back in Gaia, most of the old locations are blocked off by the roots of the Aether Tree, but the entire world is coated in mist now, which means visiting a few locations sees some big changes. The external shot of Ibsen's castle is covered in mist, which is a great visual, though as far as I can tell it's functionally unchanged. Imagine living here and getting sudden diarrhea. Just give up and get a pair of shitting pants at that point. Actually, come to think of it, there's no toilets in this game either.
Final Fantasy VIII has toilets, so that makes it the better game.
Heading to Dali, we find that part-time worker Mary and her BF Jeff have ended up in the modest town and are now running the weapon store, as the Roots destroyed all the gates in the world and the former owners have gone on that vacation they mentioned last time. Good for them, it's good to get out of the weapon shop every now and again. You can reread the old notes on the notice board, but there's a new one, which reads, "Don't try to find us, it's a private vacation." This says to me that they're nowhere else in the game, and I should stop looking. The residents of Dali are back to working the farm as well, so there's a future for the town after all. I run to the end of Memoria, figuratively, I'm still walking, and then decide to head back to the overworld to see if anything's changed. Madin Sari has the same misty background as Ibsen's castle, but looks nowhere near as cool. I guess because it's not an upside-down castle. If you head to Lindblom, the painter guy in the theatre district mentions how the mist is back, which is great, as his mist creations weren't finished. Oh, is he the guy behind the Black Mages? This is huge! To fully examine this piece of fiction, first we must give a brief 3-hour criticism of capitalism.